episode 445 of 360 Wrestling Fanatic. I will be talking about tonight's AEW Dynamite, featuring the semifinals on the women's side of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament and the Blind Eliminator Tag Team Tournament, the in-ring AEW debut of Nick Wayne, and we find out the final members of the Elite and the Blackpool Combat Club for Blood and Guts next week, right here, right now, 360 Wrestling Fanatic. Hey Wrestling Fanatics, welcome to this episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic. It's Wednesday night, and you know what that means. Time to talk about tonight's episode of AEW Dynamite, and after the recap, I'll talk a little pro wrestling news, but let's get right into the meat and potatoes. First, tonight's AEW Dynamite, which was live from Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. Almost the end of the AEW Canadian tour. Tonight's commentators are Excalibur, Tony Schiavone, and Taz. And we start things off on Dynamite this week. Chris Jericho taking on Commander, and Jericho is by himself. There are no Jericho Appreciation Society members at ringside, and these two, I thought, have had a pretty good match to start off Dynamite this week. I thought Jericho and Commander worked pretty well together in this one. As I talked about a little while back, Jericho had that really good match against Bandito, and tonight with Commander was no different. Had a good match again tonight, and it was Jericho getting the win via submission with the Lion Tamer. And then after the match, we see Don Callis make his way to the ring and again ask Jericho to join the Don Callis family, and still don't get a straight answer from Chris Jericho. But while Don Callis is out, he talks about early on in their careers with Bad News Allen, and he even shows a video of some footage of very early on in the career of himself and Chris Jericho with Bad News Allen talking to them in the ring at an indie show, which I thought this segment was pretty good, actually. It was a good thing to old footage on the screen, Bad News Allen and a young Don Callis and Chris Jericho. And we, next up, the Blind Eliminator tournament continues with Darby Allin and the AEW International Champion, freshly squeezed Orange Cassidy, taking on Sammy Guevara and Daniel Garcia. Pretty good tag team match here. I think Darby Allin and Orange Cassidy continue to work pretty well as a tag team, actually, and Garcia and Guevara very well. Also, we get some interference in this one, actually. Prince Nana comes to ringside, and Darby Allin on the apron gets kicked right in the face by Swerve Strickland, and then Strickland and Nana escape through the crowd, and Sammy Guevara is able to pin Darby Allin to get the win for himself and Daniel Garcia as they advance. But one of the key things from this is post-match, Daniel Garcia is leaving, and then Sammy Guevara gets back in the ring and actually shows some sportsmanship and shakes the hand of Darby Allin. And this kind of continues to tease the separation from Sammy Guevara from the rest of the Jericho Appreciation Society. But to also skip ahead a little bit of Dynamite, and we see Chris Jericho in the back, and he is approached by Jake Hager. And this one, morning, if you haven't seen it yet, this scene's very emotional, and Hager is worried if Jericho is going to leave the JAS and join the Don Callis family, and he even gives Chris Jericho his hat. I'm sure everybody knows by now, as he says, Jake Hager that is, I like this hat, and he actually gave it to Chris Jericho. Like I said, definitely very emotional. And next up, the Blind Eliminator Tag Team Tournament continues with Big Bill and Brian Cage taking on the AEW World Champion MJF, Maxwell, Jacob Friedman, and Adam Cole, baby. But before I get into the recap, we get another video of MJF and Adam Cole. First, they start off at a bar, and then MJF gets distracted by some ladies. And before this, though, Adam Cole told MJF that he lost their new tag team shirt with Better Than You, baby. He said he lost it, but then when MJF came back, Adam Cole told him that he would wear this shirt if one thing, and then cuts to him playing, the two of them playing AEW Fight Forever, and first MJF does not want to play the game. I think he said, was making fun of wrestling fans here, saying he doesn't want to be a nerd, but Cole tells him that MJF is on the game, and then they start playing. Looks like they're playing as themselves in a tag match against FTR, so they end up having a good time playing AEW Fight Forever. And then now on to the match. Good tag team match here. I thought MJF definitely was over with the crowd. So was Adam Cole. And Cole pins Brian Cage to get the win for himself and the AEW World Champion MJF. And next up is the semi-finals on the women's side of the Owen Hart Foundation tournament. And it is Ruby Soho going back to the finals as she defeated Sky Blue tonight in a pretty good match, actually. I definitely continue to be impressed by Sky Blue, but is Ruby Soho getting the victory and advancing to the Owen Hart Foundation Tournament Finals this Saturday on AEW Saturday Collision in Calgary, Alberta. And now we have the world premiere of the video that was teased last week on QTV by Harley Cameron. And just a short music video trying to do a rap of making fun of the Acclaimed. And I didn't think this was too bad, actually. And I know that's rap and not more actual, like, trying to be a pop star, but it kind of reminds me of Jillian Hall when she did the gimmick where she was supposed to be a bad singer, and she would come out before the matches during her entrance with the headset microphone thing and would sing terribly. But it was supposed to be bad singing because that was the gimmick or the character. And this with Harley Cameron right now kind of reminds me of that. And I think so far Harley Cameron actually is pretty good as a heel, and I think she is doing this character pretty good so far. So definitely looking forward to see how they continue this character with her and a part of QTV. And it came out the other day that she is signed with AEW now, I believe. And next up, we have Swerve Strickland making his AEW in-ring debut, the young 18-year-old sensation Nick Wayne, who comes out with Darby Allin. And Darby does go to the back, though. And just another thing I forgot to mention before I start talking about the match is earlier in the night there was another very good video package. This time Nick Wayne talking, and this was a really great video. He talks about growing up with his dad, Buddy Wayne, and Darby Allin, and the day that his mother took him into the garage and sat him on the apron of the ring that he trained in and told him that his father passed away, and talked about Darby and everything and getting into the business. There was some highlights of Defy Wrestling in here. And now on to the match. Nick Wayne versus Swerve Strickland. And this one, pretty good match actually. And it is also Nick Wayne's mother is in the front row. And it is Swerve Strickland getting the win, defeating Nick Wayne. And the finish, hopefully this is just work, but he called over to Aubrey Edwards that his shoulder was hurt. Hopefully that's not too serious, but Swerve getting the win, which not too surprised. And in the finishing moments of the match, Darby Allin did make his way back out onto the stage. And then after the match, he went into the ring to check on Nick Wayne. And also, Excalibur did bring up the fact during the match that Aubrey Edwards, who was the referee for this match, also officiated Nick Wayne's first pro wrestling match. So that I thought that was pretty good that they brought up that fact with referee Aubrey Edwards also reffing this match. I'm not too surprised that they had Swerve go over, have Wayne lose his first match. This is only his first in-ring debut on AEW, so And I'm going to be surprised if he maybe loses his first few matches and then tell a story with him and his mentor, Darby Allin, and maybe eventually have a trios match with him, Darby, and Sting. And now Don Callis is back out to reveal the 5th member of the Blackpool Combat Club for Blood and Guts next week. And Kenny Omega comes out and walks down the ramp, but then he is attacked by Jon Moxley and Konosuke Takeshita. And then somebody comes down, can't quite get a good look of who it is, attacks Kenny Omega with a chair, and I have to admit, it's not anyone who I was expecting. I wasn't thinking it to be this star, because it was somebody who we have not seen in quite a while. It is Pac attacking Kenny Omega and joining the Blackpool Combat Club team for Blood and Guts next week in Boston. And he brought up how Kenny Omega broke his nose, and he's been kind of plotting his revenge. Now, I don't know what this means for Pac and the Death Triangle. I'm guessing he's still with the Lucha Brothers, but we'll have to just wait and see. Hopefully Pac is back for good. And then at this time, they put a steel chair around the neck of Kenny Omega, and Jon Moxley gets a microphone, and I think he asks Kenny if he has any last words, and he says they still have a 5th member to reveal. He tells them to look at the screen, and there's been some speculation and some rumors of who the Elite's 5th member was going to be. And those rumors and those speculations were correct. It is none other than Kota Ibushi. Not too much of a surprise. Like I said, it's been speculated and talked about on all the wrestling news sites and podcasts. So, like I said, not really a surprise, but good to see Ibushi. And we now have the Golden Elite taking on the Blackpool Combat Club next Wednesday night in Blood and Guts in Boston at the TD Garden, which I think would be pretty good. And this is the 3rd Blood and Guts. Of course, I was at last year's June 29th, 2022, here in Detroit at Little Caesars Arena. So hopefully this one will be just as good. And Kenny Omega talked about, he said to Jon Moxley, if you think barbed wire and skewers in the head is bad, that's nothing compared to what's going to happen next week. And then he said once he takes all the Blackpool Combat Club out, or not just him, but the Elite, as soon as they're all out, and he is going to get a hold of Don Callis as Dynamite goes off the air live from Saskatoon. So that was tonight's AEW Dynamite. I thought it was a pretty good episode of Dynamite once again. Had some good matches on it. Was good to see the in-ring debut of Nick Wayne as an AEW superstar now that he is 18 years old. And before I wrap up this episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic, I want to talk a little bit news, and unfortunately have to talk about some sad news. If you remember back in, I want to say probably the early 90s, maybe mid-90s, Mantar from WWE, also Bruiser Mastino, Mike Halleck, has unfortunately passed away, only 55 years old. I definitely remember watching WWF at the time, and the Mantar character was kind of like, what was it, like a buffalo head or something that was definitely wasn't one of the greatest WWF characters that you look back on, but it is one that you definitely remember, though. And that is about all the news I have for today. And we hope to be back tomorrow with another new episode of 360 Wrestling Fanatic to talk about tomorrow night's Impact Wrestling Go Home show before Slammiversary, and the new episode of Ring of Honor on Honor Club. We'll be back tomorrow morning for Good Morning Wrestling Fans, the Thursday episode. And also remember, if you have any questions, comments, or you can leave your feedback of tonight's AEW Dynamite, you can right here in the comments section on Spreaker, or if you're listening to on YouTube, or any podcast website or app you listen to 360 Wrestling Podcasts on, or if you have a business or a company you want to advertise right here on 360 Wrestling Podcasts, you can just email me 360wrestlingpodcasts@gmail.com. Hope we can work something out. I'll try to do a real good ad for you and not mess up too badly. So that's all for tonight. Thank you everyone for tuning in as we get ready for this big weekend. Big Saturday anyway for pro wrestling. Got a lot of pro wrestling to watch this Saturday, but I'm definitely excited for it. Hopefully everyone else is too. Hope everyone has a great night. Hope everyone enjoyed Dynamite tonight. And I'll talk to everyone tomorrow morning for Good Morning Wrestling Fans. But until then, I am Lance, and I am a wrestling fanatic.